Again, we're waiting here what the president's ideas are for dealing with the supply chain disruption. They are confident that there will be goods on shelves and stocked aplenty by the holiday season. Is that doable? Let's go to Tulsi Gabbard, the former Hawaii congresswoman, also former presidential candidate. Congressman, very good to see you.
Nice to see you, Neil.
What do you make of what's been happening here? The inflation issue that's just not stopping, the supply chain disruption that also isn't stopping. The president appears caught flat-footed here. What do you make of it?
Well, you mentioned that their answer to this crisis that everyday Americans are facing across the country is to pass this massive multi-trillion-dollar bill. But the reality is that this bill is only going to make the problem worse. Our government is already too powerful. It is already too bloated. And what this bill is going to do is make inflation worse. It's going to increase the national debt. It's going to make things harder for our small businesses. And ultimately, it's going to make people more dependent on a government that already is encroaching too much in almost every part of our lives. So I think it's more important to actually start to look at how do we actually solve the real problems here rather than the direction they're taking, which is, hey, let's just throw more money at it and think that government is going to be the answer to everything when we know for a fact that it's not.
You know, there's I don't know if a battle is a fair word, Congressman, but this battle, if you will, or disagreement between progressives in your party and those more moderate, I think I would probably put you in that latter camp, who are worried that this is just going to create more problems than it solves. But progressives are still pushing for a package closer to $2 trillion. They're still pushing for this, think they have the votes to pull it off. Let's say they do. What is your worry?
Well, those numbers are almost meaningless. Those numbers have shifted. Is it 1 trillion, 2, 3, 7? And you look at them trying to manipulate the language in these bills to try to cover the fact that we don't know how much this is going to cost. We don't know still, as we sit here today, what is actually going to be included in this bill. And the language that they have put forward in this framework is so vague that ultimately what will happen is you'll end up with a bunch of bureaucrats who are unaccountable to the American people making decisions about how our taxpayer dollars are being spent. This is a fundamental problem that we've seen with all of these ideas that they're putting forward. Unaccountable bureaucrats being more empowered to put their noses into our everyday lives. Meanwhile, taxpayers, we end up paying them for them actually taking away our autonomy and micromanaging us.
You know, close to half of Democrats, and this was before what transpired in Virginia and in New Jersey, the closer than expected gubernatorial contest there, didn't think that Joe Biden would be their ideal presidential nominee in 2024. How do you feel about that?
I think that the American people, it's clear as we saw in Virginia, is actually a positive sign that they're rejecting the kind of divisiveness, racialization of everything in this country, the fomenting of anger and hatred that unfortunately we're seeing coming from so many of my fellow Democrats. And they're standing up and saying, hey, we want to choose an optimistic future, a hopeful future, a future where we can live up to that dream of Martin Luther King about judging each other by our character, not by the color of our skin, respecting each other as fellow Americans, and Democrats and Republicans actually coming together to work towards a shared goal, a shared objective of doing what is best for the American people and our country. That's the direction that we need to head in, and I think the Virginia governor's election was a positive indication of voters taking a stand and letting their voices be heard through the ballot box.
You know, we'll be going to the president very shortly, speaking right now on this supply chain disruption, Congressman. But James Carville says the problem wasn't like a right or left issue, but this increasing lecturing on the part of the Democrats with this wokeism that he says is hurting the party, damaging its message, and just doing much more harm than good. What did you make of that?
It's true. You know, when you have people in positions of power who arrogantly believe that they're not accountable to the people and who treat us like we're stupid, like they know better, they know best what's good for us more than we know ourselves, and all we got to do is blindly follow along and listen. It's no wonder that people are rejecting that. If there's no respect for us as individuals, as Americans coming from our leadership, then how could they expect that we, the American people, should offer any respect or trust towards them in what their agenda being one, unfortunately, that is more about serving their own selfish interests, more power, their political interests, than really where it should be directed, which is exactly on addressing these challenges and frustrations that the American people are facing all across our country.
Is this the same Joe Biden as president today who you were running against as a candidate for president?
I've considered Joe Biden a friend for many years, and I've been disheartened to see the direction that he's taken in this administration that is undermining the fundamental principles of our country, that is actually tearing our country apart, rather than working to bring us together, to find our way forward and have respectful dialogue, even as we may have disagreements or differences on different issues, but come together as Americans, treating each other with respect. And I think it's something that makes me sad, to be quite honest.
Tulsi Gabbard, thank you very much for taking the time. Very good seeing you again.
Thanks, Neil.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.